So let us now go into pivot tables. How we can solve complex queries using pivot tables. Next slide. Remember, this was the query, and the result should look like this, which you see on the right side. In the next screen record, I will show you how to do this with pivot tables. Okay, this is the data range of Excel. To move that into a pivot table, we have to go to Insert tab up there, and guess what? To insert a pivot table. There's a menu box that opens. I strongly suggest for the moment you just click OK. For the sake of clarity, the table range, which is now going to be moved into a pivot table, is the entire set of cells, all cells with some data in. So just click OK. And we have in the new sheet the pivot table with the pivot table fields. We are now going to work with the pivot table fields. So what we wanted at the beginning with was the count of how many movies, that is this color and black and white, the number of movies, to be moved into the sigma values, the summary values. This is where the quantitative result is made. So as a whole, we have 3,725 movies, which is exactly the number of rows of the spreadsheet, minus the header. So it works so fine, right? But then we want to divide this movie by director name. And so we move the director name into the rows folder, into the rows bottom. And we have the amount of movies each director name has made, the count of color and black and white. Alex de la Iglesia 1, and lots of people with 1. At this point, I want to identify the top 5. The top 5 is a filter that I apply to these row labels. Click on this menu here, this button here, and set the value filters. And I find out there is top 10. Top 10, actually, top 10 filter is the name of a filter that is set to top 10, but we can change this top 10 to top 7, 6, 5, top 5. That's what we want. Top 5 by what? By how many movies, which is the count of all black and white movies. Okay, so these are the top 5. Clicking on any field in the count thing, I see that they are not sorted. I right click here and I have to sort this data, largest to smallest. And I have Spielberg, Clint Eastwood, Woody Allen, Martin Scorsese, Ridley Scott. Now we want a little bit more. We want to know how many color and how many black and white. So I want to include into the rows not just the name of the author, of the director, but also if it was a color and black and white. I do this because I want to show you that once you have put color black and white here in the values box, you can reuse color and black and white again. It is possible to have the same field counted as a row, as a value, as a column, as a filter. It's crisscrossing data. That's the strength of pivot table. And now we have it. Steven Spielberg, 24 movies overall, 2 in black and white, surprisingly so, and 22 in colors. Clint Eastwood, 1 movie in black and white, and 18 movies in color. And that is it. We solved the issue. So again, this is how we pass from a pivot table to results. Color, black and white, director name are two fields that we used in two different field areas, and one we used in both field areas, in the rows and the values. This is why we say that pivot tables allow us to easily organize, filter, and summarize, and also analyze row data. It's very easy. Don't really believe those who say that pivot tables are a mess, are complex, are unbelievably difficult to use. That's not true. They are powerful, beautiful, fast, accurate, and flexible. What you really need to do is to familiarize, get acquainted with them. It takes a small amount of time. It does take time, but a very small amount of time. And after you have spent a couple of hours, yes, a couple of hours, trying to learn how to use the pivot tables, then you will find that you can save months of your lifetime in the next years in your career. I am thankful to Udemy, an online course sellers, for these slides. The most important thing, if you really want to work with pivot tables, if you really want to work with Excel, is to have your data structure well organized. If you have your data in a right, clean, tabular structure, then everything is going to be feasible, if not easy. Most of the time, it's going to be easy. But if, as in the left side, you have a bad data organization with transposed variables, unnecessary formatting, calculated fields, confusing columns header, period 1, period 3, period 4, what does that mean? Call it January, February, March, April, call it first, second, third week, but make it something meaningful. Extra header rows that are not really necessary. Then if you're on the bad side, it is not going to be possible to use pivot tables. On the left side, the good spreadsheet, you see the difference? Rectangular, variables are columns, observations are rows. No extra formatting. We don't need formats when we want to use pivot tables. Pivot tables can be marvelous on their own without any formats. This table on the left side, the good one, contains only dimensions and measures, the name of the variable, and then the value of the variable. The column headers are only one row, and they are clear. Flight date, destination city, destination state, type of travel. No fringe, no fuzzy, no funny things. No extra headers, no footers, no subtitles, and no calculated fields. Calculated fields, we leave them for pivot table to work on them. So this is a short recap of what we have done so far. This was the original spreadsheet. This is what happens when we insert a pivot table. You go to Insert tab, Pivot Table, and then just click OK. Quite an important thing is when you insert a new pivot table, you'll notice an option at the bottom of the dialog box that says Add this data to the data model. Leave this box unchecked. Do not check that box. Trust me. Then when you click Insert the Pivot Table, an entire new sheet opens, sheet 4 in this case. The original data is always there in the IMDb movie database sheet. But in sheet 4 or sheet 3 or whatever you have the pivot table fields where you can control the query that you do on the IMDb movie database, the extraction of the selection of data that you want to produce the report. This is where you actually produce a report. You know, a pivot table basically is just a report tool. It's a tool to produce a report and a chart, as we will see in a moment. Now, this is now a comprehensive view of the field list. All the boxes that controls a pivot table, they are called fields. The top one is the field lists that shows all the variables in the data set. And you can tick them which one of those variables you want to include in the pivot. So which one of those variables you want to analyze. Next, the filters box is where you want to, well, filter the data. Let's say only a certain amount of years, not the whole range of years. Next, the rows. It's the variables that you want to appear in the rows of the report. Director name and color black and white in our case. Sometimes you might want variables to be included into the columns fields, and then the columns fields will show you exactly the same thing, only vertically rather than horizontally. The last one, the numerical values, the sigma field, it's likely to be the most important of all. That's where the real results are. The other fields are for helping you to organize the data. The sigma values is where you have the quantitative results, the numbers. You can have them sums, averages, percentages, depending on what you need.